Financial markets in turmoil.
What are the root causes of the financial crisis?
The dollar losing value.
Heading for its biggest loss in nearly 3 decades.
Will Social Security even be there?
I don't know.
Buy or rent?
That's a very good question.
Interest rates.
I'm not so sure.
Where do you put your money?
I don't know.
Welcome to the show that answers your questions. This is Follow the Money Weekly with your host, economist, and best-selling author. Here's Jerry Robinson.
Friends, welcome to this week's edition of Follow the Money Weekly. So glad that you're joining us. Well, what do we have here? We have a brand new war, don't we? Right here in the United States of America. We are heading now to war with ISIS or ISIL or the Islamic State or IS or whatever they're calling them this week. War. We're heading to war with Islamic jihadists in the Middle East. It's becoming almost a rite of passage for U.S. presidents to bomb Iraq. In fact, the last 4 presidents now have taken their turn at pummeling the sand of Iraq, trying to whip that nation into shape. It began back on January 16th, 1991. When then President George H.W. Bush made a decision that it would be prudent to begin invading Saddam Hussein's Iraq.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. Air attacks are underway against military targets in Iraq. We will not fail. Some may ask, why act now? Why not wait? The answer is clear. The world could wait no longer. I've told the American people before that this will not be another Vietnam. We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
One of the unfortunate realities that the elder Bush failed to mention in that clip, in that speech to the nation, was the fact that Saddam Hussein was indeed not just a CIA asset back in the 1950s, probably as early as 1959, but indeed he was supported by the United States during the Iran-Iraq War, where the United States, underneath President Ronald Reagan, was effectively funding both sides of the Iran-Iraq War. So when concerns arose later about Saddam Hussein having some pretty big weapons and some pretty devastating capabilities, the United States was simply going off of the weapons that had been given to Saddam's regime. They knew that they had given plenty of weapons to Saddam for him to fight against Iran. And they had also given weapons to Iran to fight against Iraq. This is how the United States deals in the Middle East. This is the hard reality. This is the hard truth. It's almost comical when you hear him say that it's not going to turn into another Vietnam. In fact, he is right. It's actually worse, isn't it? Because we have been now fighting in Iraq, in the center of the heart of the Middle East, for many, many years, since 1991, on and off, on and off. Then there was President Bill Clinton. Hey, how you doing? Good old President Clinton, coming before the American people on December the 16th, 1998, in the midst of a major scandal that he was dealing with at the time. And it was his turn to drop bombs on Iraq. Here's a little snippet of his speech from the Oval Office. Roll the tape.
Earlier today, I ordered America's armed forces to strike military and security targets in Iraq. They are joined by British forces. Their mission is to attack Iraq's nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons programs and its military capacity to threaten its neighbors. Their purpose is to protect the national interest of the United States and indeed the interests of people throughout the Middle East and around the world. Saddam will strike again at his neighbors. He will make war on his own people. And mark my words, he will develop weapons of mass destruction. He will deploy them, and he will use them. Because we're acting today, it is less likely that we will face these dangers in the future. But once more, the United States has proven that although we are never eager to use force, when we must act in America's vital interests, we will do so.
Well, President Clinton's airstrikes and his campaign only lasted about 4 days. The bombing campaign didn't last too long, but we weren't done with Saddam Hussein. In fact, after the tragic events of September 11, 2001, when 15 out of the 19 hijackers who were Saudi Arabian flew airplanes into the World Trade Center and into the Pentagon and into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. In fact, a couple of things immediately happened. Number one, Washington began promoting the idea that Osama bin Laden was indeed guilty of masterminding the most horrific terrorist attack in recent memory. Osama bin Laden, by the way, part of the bin Laden family, a very wealthy billionaire family that became extremely rich on the back of Saudi Arabia as it grew from the desert. Of course, the Saud family, the House of Saud, renamed the country after their own family and then began cutting deals with different people in the country. And of course, one of the big families that made a dent in the country was the bin Laden family. The patriarch of the bin Laden family, actually an engineer, construction worker, extremely talented, extremely brilliant. And one day he decided to build a ramp that would deliver the aging King Saud up to his palace bedroom. And this, of course, was considered such a wonderful thing. And next thing you knew, the bin Laden group, the big construction company in Saudi Arabia, began getting all kinds of contracts. First, a road that would be constructed from the city of Jeddah all the way over to the city of Medina. And other things came after that, including the reconstruction and rebuilding of many of the holy sites in Mecca itself. So very quickly, the bin Laden family became extremely wealthy, and they were extremely tight with the ruling family, the royal family. So everybody in the royal family knew the bin Ladens, and most of them, if not all of them, were familiar with Osama bin Laden. So what does President Bush do in the hours just after 9/11? Well, I'm reading to you from a story from CBS, not necessarily a alternative news network, certainly part of the big mainstream media. Here's a report they have from September 30th, 2001. It says 24 members of Osama bin Laden's family were urgently evacuated from the United States in the first days following the terrorist attacks on New York and Washington. The story goes on to explain while all air traffic was ceased here in the United States, there was a plane flying around the country picking up bin Laden family members and then whisking them away to Saudi Arabia. All right. So, in other words, Bush did not want these family members interrogated. He didn't even want them interviewed in a friendly fashion. They simply got out of the country. And this was an absolute astonishing thing that was completely missed by most of the mainstream press. Now, I mean, here you have the man himself, Osama bin Laden, who we are being told over and over again did this, and yet his family was allowed to leave, evacuated out of the country, not even a single question. And what did we hear later? Well, Bush was good buddies with the bin Laden family. The Bush family and the bin Laden family and the Saud family, all friends. That's just historical fact. It's unfortunate, but it's historical fact. You can read all about that at the library. There's plenty of good books on the entanglement of the American White House and the Saudi royal family and all of the trappings that go along with it. But again, President Bush didn't even think that it was wise to talk to some of the bin Laden family just to say, hey, have you seen him? Hey, do you know who he might be hanging out with? Do you know where he might be? When's the last time you talked to him? Do you have any contact? Not a single thing. Just get him out of here, right? Just get him out of here. So it looks very suspicious, obviously, as the bin Laden family is allowed to leave without any kind of interrogation. So what does President George W. Bush decide to do about the bombing of the World Trade Center by 15 Saudi Arabians, led by another Saudi Arabian, bin Laden. Boy, it's a real nail biter, this one. What will Bush do? Well, what would any good president do if they found themselves in his shoes? Well, they'd bomb Iraq.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign. Our nation enters this conflict reluctantly, yet our purpose is sure. The people of the United States and our friends and allies will not live at the mercy of an outlaw regime that threatens the peace with weapons of mass murder. We will meet that threat now with our Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, and Marines. This will not be a campaign of half measures, and we will accept no outcome but victory. My fellow citizens, the dangers to our country and the world will be overcome. We will pass through this time of peril and carry on the work of peace. We will defend our freedom. We will bring freedom to others, and we will prevail.
So that brings us to today. Now we have all three of these former presidents who had their turn striking Iraq for various reasons. First, they were striking Saddam Hussein, who they had set up and who they had funded and who they had helped and who they had trained. And then they decide to topple him. Now, this is a very familiar story in the Middle East because this is exactly what the United States does. The United States goes into the Middle East. They train people, they give people weapons, they give people things, and then all of a sudden the weapons get turned around on them and they have to do something about it. By the way, bin Laden, was he someone that was supported by the United States? Of course he was. I mean, there is absolute evidence, complete evidence, that the United States was supporting bin Laden's group just like they support other radical groups in the region who they believe can help further their cause. And that's exactly what we have today, friends. ISIS, who we are getting ready to hear, got a little condensed version of President Barack Obama telling us how he's going to go drop bombs on Iraq. It's just part and parcel of being the U.S. president. That now it's time to go bomb Iraq again. This time we're going after a bunch of rogue terrorists. Now, what the media is failing to tell you about these terrorists is that many of them were fighting in Syria and in Iraq, and they were also receiving support from Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the United States. This is a very unfortunate fact that history will look back upon and see this. And it's very important, I believe, is for you as an individual, as an American citizen, or whatever country you are a citizen of, to realize that the United States has an agenda in the Middle East. And some people think that it's just basically getting the oil, but that's not necessarily the truth. Other people think that the reason that the United States is in the Middle East is because they want to control the resources and the flow of those resources to make sure that their currency remains in place, thus the petrodollar system. And yes, that certainly is a major part of it. But there's another part as well, which we're not going to talk about on today's program, but we're going to talk about it soon, because if you really want to destroy the terrorists in the Middle East, you have to cut off the head of those who finance them. And in large part, the financiers of the ISIS terrorists that are running through the streets of Iraq and Syria and now threaten to spill over into other countries are being funded by individuals in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar. Now, why won't the United States take up this cause against Saudi Arabia? Why won't they confront Saudi Arabia? Friends, if we were to call Saudi Arabia on their financing of terror, our economy would go up in flames, because they are the ones who allow the United States to continue its overspending and its overproduction of its currency. The U.S. and the Saudis have a long-standing relationship that goes back to the 1940s, when President FDR met with King Saud, and the two cut a deal: oil and military. It's always been the same. You give us oil at reasonable prices, we give you military support. So the Saudis have built out a massive infrastructure in their country for the United States military. And the United States military, in many ways, is the Saudi Arabian military. So when the Saudis want something done, they call their friends at the White House. They call up George Bush. They call up Obama. And who do they want to get rid of in the Middle East? Lo and behold, Iran, who is trying to build a pipeline from its vast natural gas resources in the Persian Gulf and the Caspian Sea, and to deliver them up to Syria. But they can't seem to do that right now because Syria is in the middle of a massive civil war. So here's a condensed clip of President Barack Obama delivering his speech on ISIL, explaining why this time it's different.
My fellow Americans, tonight I want to speak to you about what the United States will do with our friends and allies to degrade and ultimately destroy the terrorist group known as ISIL, which calls itself the Islamic State. ISIL is a terrorist organization, pure and simple, and it has no vision other than the slaughter of all who stand in its way. So ISIL poses a threat to the people of Iraq and Syria and the broader Middle East, including American citizens, personnel, and facilities. If left unchecked, these terrorists could pose a growing threat beyond that region, including to the United States. Our objective is clear. We will degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL through a comprehensive and sustained counterterrorism strategy. Moreover, I've made it clear that we will hunt down terrorists who threaten our country wherever they are. That means I will not hesitate to take action against ISIL in Syria as well as Iraq.
Stop the tape. Okay, so what President Barack Obama is in essence saying is that he wants the permission or the ability to strike anywhere that he deems necessary. Now, this is a huge can of worms, and on top of all of this, the president has stressed over and over again how he knows that he doesn't need the support of the Congress to go and wage war, when that is expressly unconstitutional. And of course, presidents always point back to the War Powers Act, and they talk about how much power they really have, and the executive orders that they can pass, and all of this power that has been invested in the executive branch of Washington. But the truth of the matter is that it's still constitutional for the President of the United States to go before the Congress and ask for a declaration of war, a formal declaration of war. Now, Obama should not be picked on only because we have had other presidents before him who have refused to go by the Constitution. They are power-hungry individuals who feel invincible and decide that they can skirt the law or rely upon some little petty language in some act and say that they don't have to obey the Constitution. But the fact of the matter remains that President Barack Obama, if he wants to drop bombs on other countries, should have to go before the Congress. And you know what? The Congress, this is really a good safeguard, because the Congress, you know what the Congress is going to do to President Barack Obama if this goes bad. They're going to say, oh, he didn't come to us for help. We would have told him no. That's a bunch of BS, because you know that there is a tremendous amount of support on the right for engaging ISIS in the Middle East. And if you don't know that, just look, in different polls, and you'll see it's very clear that there is support. But, we're so close to an election time, and the Congress really doesn't want to vote on it, so they're not going to force him to come before them and say, you have to come before the Congress, because they don't want to put a vote on it. They don't want to say no, and then it goes well, and they don't want to say yes, and it goes bad. So they're fine just to say, well, President, Barack Obama, you just do whatever you want, and we'll blame you if it goes bad, and if it goes good, we'll deny the fact that it went good. Okay? That's pretty much how the whole thing works in Washington. So there's a real big problem with him getting a blank check to go wherever is necessary to find ISIS, because you know what they're saying now? I mean, if you've listened to the news the last couple of days, they're talking about how, and I don't know where this news is coming from, it's not valid so far that I have seen, but they're talking about how ISIS is now on the border of Mexico, right? operating in Juarez, Mexico. And you start to think to yourself, and you think, now, wait a minute, do we really want Barack Obama to have the ability to start flying drones over Texas if ISIS comes into town? Look, this whole thing could spin out of control real fast, real fast. Now, the other problem with this new ISIS strategy, if you want to call it that, is that it's not really a strategy, and it's not really going to work, because what President Barack Obama has said is that he is not going to put troops on the ground. Now, when you're fighting a war, and I'm certainly no war expert, but I've read my fair share of good war strategies and history, war history, and the way that I understand a war operates is you send in the air power, launch your airstrikes, and then the ground troops come in behind the airstrikes and take the ground. They take the territory. So the ground troops are needed to take the territory. The air power is not going to take territory. It's just going to stop the current advance. And then the ground troops come in and take the territory. Well, the way that Washington is spinning this is that they're going to have the Free Syrian Army or the Iraqi Army. I mean, who knows who they're planning on using. And they're going to be the ground troops. But we already know Iraq hightailed it and ran the last time they saw ISIS. And the Syrian army is a paltry army, so nobody expects them to be able to take on ISIS. And there are conflicting reports coming out now that the Syrian Free Army, who are the quote-unquote moderate Syrian rebels, whatever that means, who Obama wants to give more weapons to now, and who the Republicans want to give more weapons to now, are cutting deals with ISIS, signing peace agreements with ISIS, because they all want the same thing. What do they want? They want Bashar Assad gone, right? But who else wants Bashar Assad gone? Saudi Arabia, Israel. Plenty of people want Bashar Assad gone. So why don't one of these countries go take him out? Why doesn't Saudi Arabia take all of its weapons that it has and go fight Bashar al-Assad? Why not? Right? Or who else wants to get rid of him? Turkey, right? Well, at least that's what they say. But Turkey now has decided that it's not even going to remain part of the original core coalition, the 10 nations that were going to strike ISIS from NATO. So not only is Turkey not going to be helping, they are also a chief recruiter for ISIS. So this is an absolute mess, absolute mess. And now Barack Obama says we're only going to rely upon airstrikes and air power, and we're not putting boots on the ground. So how are you going to win the war? Let's hear him talk about that. Roll that clip.
As I've said before, these American forces will not have a combat mission. We will not get dragged into another ground war in Iraq. Now, it will take time to eradicate a cancer like ISIL. And any time we take military action, there are risks involved, especially to the servicemen and women who carry out these missions. But I want the American people to understand how this effort will be different from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It will not involve American combat troops fighting on foreign soil. This counterterrorism campaign will be waged through a steady, relentless effort to take out ISIL wherever they exist using our air power and our support for partners' forces on the ground.
You know, this is what I think whenever I hear President Barack Obama speaking. America doesn't have a long-term strategy. We don't know what we're doing in the Middle East. I mean, really, do we really know what we're doing in the Middle East? Do we really know what we're doing there? We have any clue what our long-term strategy or our long-term goal is? And if we do know, do the American people know what it is? Are we just going to continue to be Saudi Arabia's army, and every time they want to get rid of somebody, we do it? Then somebody says, Jerry, no, we're not Saudi Arabia's army, we're Israel's army. Man, you better wake up. That's all I can tell you. The United States has 2 wives. They have 2 wives. When you look at the United States right now, you're looking at a drunk, fat 1977 Las Vegas Elvis, okay? Real fat, drugged up, can't remember the words to the song, used to be great, now not so hot. And that's exactly what America is. And America has two wives in the Middle East. They have Israel and they have Saudi Arabia. And our military forces operate for both countries. They operate for Israel and they operate for Saudi Arabia. We have two wives in the Middle East. We serve two masters in the Middle East, and that's why you have absolute total chaos. We serve Israel for an entirely different set of reasons as we serve Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is purely an economic alliance. Really is. I mean, we have nothing in common with Saudi Arabia. How many people have they beheaded this year? An outrageous number. We have nothing in common with Saudi Arabia except our greed for more. And that's why that alliance, that relationship is going to implode. Our relationship with the Saudis is going to implode. And when it does implode, when the Saudis finally have it up to here and say, you know what, we're tired of asking you to bomb Syria, we're tired of asking you to get rid of Iran because we want to control the Middle East, and you won't do it, you won't go and bomb Iran, you won't go and bomb. And you see what happens is it sounds like we're trying to do it for Israel. That's what comes out in the media. Oh, look, the United States wants to help Israel. They want to fight Iran. Iran is Israel's worst nightmare. Friends, Israel has nuclear weapons. They have some serious nuclear weapons. Okay, if they wanted to use them, they could. And can they? Yes. But the United States won't let Israel drop nuclear bombs in the Middle East because their economy would be impacted. The U.S. economy would be impacted. America has no long-term strategy. It has not voiced it. We don't have a long-term strategy, not just for the Middle East. We don't have a long-term strategy to pay down our national debt. We don't have a long-term strategy to fund our entitlement programs. We don't have a long-term strategy for our healthcare system. We don't have a long-term strategy for fixing our economy. China has a long-term strategy, and they're implementing it. Japan has a long-term strategy, and they are implementing it. Heck, even India has a long-term strategy. But because of the outrageous levels of political gridlock in Washington, America has no long-term strategy. Developing a long-term national strategy requires a common and shared vision for the future. But America is divided, and Americans seem to like it that way. They've been taught to like it that way by the corporate-owned and corporate-controlled media who have worked overtime in recent years to thwart any attempt at national reconciliation. Now, we're not going to agree on everything. America's still the world's melting pot. We're made up of many different people. But the media is intent, the corporate-controlled media. Don't forget that. They are corporate-controlled. 90 to 95% of everything that you see and hear on a daily basis that passes itself off as news comes from 5 corporations. We've done a program on this. We've talked to you about this. 5 corporations control what you see and hear on a daily basis when you think you're hearing the news. So don't forget that they're corporate-owned and they have corporate interest and they have a profit motive. Their goal is not to keep you informed, right? They could care less if you know what's going on. The media doesn't care at all how informed you are. It's the last thing they care about. They don't care if you know anything about what's really happening. That's the last thing they care about at all. The only thing they care about is making sure that they maximize profit. Friends, if they think anything else, they will be fired, right? It is a law. They have to put shareholders first, not their viewers first. They could care less about you. They tell you they care about you, but that's part of the business model, you see? They've got to act like they care about you. Otherwise, you wouldn't use their products and services. Oh, yeah, we care about you. Oh, we want you to, oh, yeah, no spin zone here, right? We report, you decide, or whatever kind of garbage they tell you, right? But on the other side of it, it's profit motive. They want your money. And how do they get your money? By you tuning in. That's all they want is you to tune in, right? And they'll say anything that they think will keep you there, right? Because the more you watch, the more advertising dollars they get. And their quest for profits has poisoned the national conversation over so many topics because controversy sells. According to the 2013 estimates of the Census Bureau, America has a population of just over 316 million people. It was at 312 the last time that I looked. Now it's at 316. Now, when you break down the overall population demographics, you find that 77.7% of the nation is white, Caucasian. Right? 17.1% of the nation is Hispanic, Latino. 13.2% of the population or the nation is black, African American. And another 5.3% is Asian American. So you really have a melting pot here in the United States, but still a very large, almost overwhelming majority of white Caucasian people. But the nation itself is completely at war. The levels of corruption in Washington and in New York are at all-time highs. The trust of the people within the institutions in Washington and New York are at all-time lows. And much of it has to do with our present leadership. When President Barack Obama stood before the nation several nights ago and delivered that speech that I just played you a clip of, I could barely believe my ears. This man, the absolute nerve of this man. About 1 year ago, Mr. Obama broke into our evenings to tell us that America was preparing to invade Syria. You remember? It was time to remove the illegitimate leader, Bashar al-Assad. The corrupt, corporate-owned, and controlled mainstream media showed us horrific images burned into our brain, meant to stir a fire deep within America to resurrect and mobilize our massive military machine to aim it directly at Bashar al-Assad. And for a period of at least a few weeks, it seemed that U.S. air power would overwhelm Damascus and bring down the tyrant Assad. But now we're being told that we must fight the rebels who want to take down Bashar al-Assad. Now we're fighting to protect Bashar al-Assad. The lunacy is off the charts. And he's not alone, ladies and gentlemen. Let's not single out Mr. Obama as the only complete stooge, either due to missing brain cells or evil intent, who has driven the American car right off the cliff. We have corruption. It's bubbling forth from every institution in Washington, every institution in New York, and it's not just America. There's an old Persian proverb that says, if the teacher be corrupt, the world will be corrupt. Edmund Burke once said it this way: among a people generally corrupt, liberty cannot long exist. Friends, if you're like me, you feel it in your bones. We took a bad turn a long time ago, and we are paying the consequences now, but I'm afraid, friends, that the greatest consequences still lie straight ahead. God help us.
Show me the money.
Show me the money. I can use money.
More great tips, tools, and advice coming up on Follow the Money Weekly.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Jerry Robinson's PACE Portfolio. Learn how to shield your investments from economic uncertainty with this complete do-it-yourself portfolio package. Learn more at paceportfolio.com. That's PACE portfolio.com.
Follow the Money Weekly presents your precious metals market update. Here's Tom Cloud.
There's not a whole lot to talk about early in the week. Certainly we had the big drop last week in metals and broke some support levels that are concerning to anyone in the business as well as you, the investor. As we look at things and all the money that's been created over the past 3, 4, 5 years, it's mind-boggling now because gold had been going up and the dollar had been coming down. But what our clients have to realize is that the dollar right now, even though it's technically the weakest currency in the world when you look at the amount of money that's being printed, because the European countries are having more problems, we're seeing the dollar go up, and it could go higher. certainly it's going to break down at some point. So, a lot of our clients are on the sidelines waiting on a more clear direction. And the first thing this week we'll see is later in the week when they have the Federal Open Market Committee meeting headed by Chairman Chief Yellen. She will come out on Thursday, and I think it's Thursday, and give the State of the Union address. And basically one of two things will happen. Number one, she will finally say that interest rates have to go up. The economy is strong enough to handle a rise in interest rate because all the bond markets and everything are very, very scary, especially municipality bond markets are getting scarier as you look at them. So if she comes out and says they're going to raise interest rates in the first quarter of 2015, you can expect more strength in the dollar and gold prices to even weaken a little further than they have already. If she comes out with a very dovish statement of it's still too early to tell and interest rates, we haven't got a clear path as to when we'll raise them, and talk about any more quantitative easing cut, then that'll be considered dovish, and you will see the price of gold go up later in the week. So it is an important week for momentum traders, and while we're on the subject of momentum traders, they're probably the ones that are affecting the market the most. If you're a momentum trader, whether you're trading stocks, indexes, gold, silver, coffee, wheat, corn, whatever it is, if you can get the market to move one way or the other and add money to it to pick up the momentum to make something go down or up, and then get out when you have a profit you're satisfied with. And the momentum traders out there today are moving a lot of markets. Some of them they're moving down that should be going up, and some they're moving up that should be going down. Of course, we've learned over 38 years of doing this, and especially during the Obama years, is you really can't, this world changes on a dime daily with all the news and problems going on. So it's, once again, the momentum traders have a big effect on it when you get into environments like we're in right now. But all the time in services, no one says the bull market has been broken in gold and silver. They say gold could go back to 1180, where it was in June of last year for a triple bottom, and some think silver could go back down to the 1680 range. Right now it's around the 1860s, and others are saying no, there's going to be a rally coming this week. Later in the week, we got two prominent people predicting gold back up 1,300 or above this month, and silver back up in the 20 to 21 range, which would be 10 to 15% gain. So once again, you just have to look at it and realize it's a good buy long term, and cost average in, as we've been talking about. But the one thing I talk about just about every week is you've been given a gift, because palladium has been pulled from 888 down to 840s in this 5% drop last week that had nothing to do with anything except that gold and silver were being attacked on the momentum buyer's side, and palladium got drugged down with it. But there's not a single thing out there that's changed anybody's opinion on palladium, and we're getting into near the time when the Russian part, remember there are two major producers of palladium in the world, South Africa and the Soviet Union, and the mines are in Siberia where it's very cold and the winter comes early. While it's not winter time there yet, within the next 30 days, those mines are expected to close due to weather, and then you're going to start seeing the prices move up as long as there's demand for palladium, which is used primarily for the catalytic converter. So you've been given a $40 gift. I would urge anybody who doesn't have palladium to take advantage of this, because we still feel we're going to have over 900 this year and possibly even 1,000 in the first quarter of next year. So that's the same thing I've been saying, and a lot of you have done very, very well on palladium this year, but it's a great time to be buying. As always, I'm available for questions. You can reach me at 800-247-2812. That's 800-247-2812. And also, if you are looking for a self-directed precious metals IRA, we can help you with that to show you how to set it up and explain how that works to you also on a self-directed rollover for an IRA. So hopefully we'll have more news soon, but right now we're cautious and are watching very closely the markets day by day. And next week we're going to try to do a bigger interview with Jerry and, get into more details rather than just covering the topics, subjects we cover on this weekly. We're going to get in a little more depth next week, as we think it'll be a great time to get into that after the Fed meeting and what's going on in Europe and other countries, and also the move away from the dollar by the Russians and Chinese. We'll have some talk about that next week. Until next week, this is Tom Cloud signing out.
Hey friends, this is Jerry Robinson from Follow the Money Weekly. Recently, we have been receiving many emails from our listeners commenting on the great help they're getting from our precious metals expert, Tom Cloud. Gold and silver are excellent hedges against the growing threat of coming U.S. inflation. Who's your gold guy? Make it Tom Cloud. With over 30 years experience with precious metals, Tom will answer all of your questions. Don't buy your gold and silver through some call center and pay inflated prices. Call my good friend Tom Cloud and speak directly with him and get all of your questions answered. For a limited time, Tom is offering free shipping and insurance on every gold and silver purchase made by our listeners. Call 800-247-2812. And when you do, tell him that Jerry Robinson from Follow the Money Weekly sent you, and he'll throw in that free shipping and insurance on your entire order. Call your gold guy, Tom Cloud, right now for the very best deals on gold and silver coins. 800-247-2812. That is 800-247-2812.
With this week's Trigger Trade Report, I'm Jennifer Robinson. Well, it was a rather busy trading week as we sold 7 positions. Our big winner was White Wave Foods, ticker symbol WWAV, with a profit of 12.66% in only 24 days. Some other notable trades included ticker symbol UDR for a 2.89% gain and ticker symbol AMX for about a 3.25% gain. Our Google trade looked promising but ended up stopping out for a 2.62% loss. We have 8 stocks in play in the markets, including ticker symbol HBAN up 2.25%, ticker symbol SIRI up 2%, and our latest trade in play, ticker symbol GLNG, up 3.72% in only 3 trading days. Trigger Trading is a service we provide to all of our FTM insiders in which they receive Jerry Robinson's daily stock trading idea, complete with buy price, stop loss price, exit targets, commentaries, and daily status updates. You can learn more and view all of our trading performance for the past year and a half at ftmdaily.com/trigger trade. That's ftmdaily.com/trigger trade. Attention stock traders! FTM Daily is proud to announce our latest resources for stock traders of all experience levels. Are you ready to wade in the stock trading waters? Well, unlock Jerry Robinson's trading room and receive his daily stock trading idea, complete with buy price, stop loss price, exit target, and daily trading alerts. Become an FTM insider and unlock the trading room instantly. But perhaps one stock idea per day is not enough for you. No problem. Get everything in option 1 plus. Analyze any U.S. stock or ETF for short-term and long-term buy and sell signals with our new Trigger Trade Pro system. Find FTM Insider and Trigger Trade Pro in our online store today. Visit ftmdaily.com/store or give us a call at 800-609-5530. That's ftmdaily.com/store or call us at 800-609-5530.
All right, friends, well, that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you so much for choosing to allow us into your life each and every week right here on Follow the Money Weekly Radio. And as always, I leave you with this final word, this time a little bit of news. There was a terrible story coming out earlier this week about 27 Christians who were meeting in their home in Saudi Arabia. After being tipped off by the police, all 27 people were captured during their home Bible study and were hauled off to prison, many of them women and children. And they're predominantly of Asian descent. Join us in praying for these 27 people who don't stand a chance, unfortunately, in Washington, because Washington does not have a backbone to stand up to Saudi Arabia. So join me in praying for these precious people and for their protection. All right, friends. Well, remember, when you want the truth about the global economy, just follow the money. Have a safe and prosperous week, and I'll see you right back here next Tuesday. Until then, God bless.
All of the information contained on Follow the Money is strictly for informational and educational purposes. The views and opinions of our guests and sponsors, including Tom Cloud and Jay Peroni, are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of FTMDaily.com or Robinson Media Group, LLC. Jerry and Jennifer Robinson do hold their insurance licenses and may offer consulting on life insurance and fixed retirement income products. Jennifer Robinson is an investment advisor representative with Faith-Based Investor, LLC. Remember, never do your financial planning through podcast or radio. It's your money. Be wise. Do your due diligence and always consult a trusted